Hello, and welcome to Behind the Headlines here on WTAJ Plus. I hope you know who I am. I'm Marty Radovanic, and I'm pleased to be starting this new project, which basically is going to be exactly what it says, Behind the Headlines. We're going to look at stories, events. We're going to talk about them, maybe do a little deeper dive than we would do in a normal newscast. And I want to say right up front that if you've got ideas for stories you'd like to see us tackle, please email me, and you'll see my email address on the screen. I would appreciate it because your memory is going to be probably better than mine, but between the two of us, we'll figure something out. Well, our first edition favors an old friend. And I don't say old as a way of being disrespectful, although he is 2 years older than I am. Right. You probably recognize him. He's Jon McClintock, who was a reporter at WTAJ. John, tell me again, it was late 70s?
It would have been 74 to 79.
74 to 79. He also had a bit of a political bent to him. He ran some campaigns and did things. But for this discussion, both of us are going to go back to an event that on Sunday will celebrate, or mark is probably a better way of saying it, the 48th anniversary of the Johnstown Flood of 1977. Much to talk about, but we want to start with reporter Jon on a story that he recorded 48 years ago. Take a look.
We have reports tonight on the situation in Johnstown from Fran Fanchel and Jon McClintock.
They said it would never happen again, but it did. Torrential thunderstorms soaked the area late yesterday, and by early this morning, it was impossible to reach what has come to be known as the Flood City. Early last evening, it looked like just another rain, but soon sewers could no longer handle the crush. Water backed up behind the bridges where debris had jammed, and the flood of 77 in Johnstown had begun. Area highways buckled or totally eroded, others clogged with floating automobiles. Firemen had to watch helplessly throughout the night as several homes and businesses burned to the ground, not for lack of water, but for a means to get to them. And though the terror of tens of thousands of residents was at its greatest in the wet dark, morning brought the full realization about what had happened. The entire downtown area was either flooded or knee-deep in mud. Red Cross officials worked quickly, using boats to transfer blood from their disabled refrigerators to a nearby dairy. Other boats that arrived as a result of appeals in other areas ferried stranded homeowners to higher ground. Hospital officials say they were able to maintain basic operations with only 2% of normal electricity, but still, 3 persons died in one facility overnight.
The hospital was flooded in the basement. There was no water damage from the first floor up. The water stopped about 4 inches under the first floor, so all the patient areas, diagnostic areas, were not affected.
It was Johnstown's main shopping area that was hard hit in previous floods, and this year was no exception. But the major problem for merchants and police was mud and the fear of looting. Both state and local police patrolled the sector, and with orders to shoot to kill looters, chased all civilians out of the area. Still, other civilians volunteered their assistance and patrolled with shotguns. But it was not the downtown area that was worst hit. Nearby Hornerstown was still a series of rivers and lakes late today. Residents say at least 3 bodies were taken from the neighborhood. Cars upon cars upon cars were piled against everything, and piles of brush made it hard to discern which houses were simply covered or were totally collapsed. One survivor of the flood of 1936 said this flood was every bit as bad.
Cars are piled up more. There's more debris, I think, and everything else. In compared with 36, you didn't have all this that you're looking at right there in the corner.
All the debris. Did you ever think it would happen again?
No, not with the river wall, and I never thought it could happen.
It was not apparently the fault of the dike levee system that Cambria County flooded this morning. Instead, simply too much rain for sewer inlets and a series of dams building with debris at bridges. Mayor Herbert Fuel estimates damage in the city will total $100 million, but that doesn't include probably the outlying areas. Just getting to Johnstown today was an accomplishment. The major artery into town, Route 56, was only a patchwork of a highway. Piles of rock and brush extended at times over 4 lanes of the road, and in other areas only 2 lanes of the highway were left, the rest being swept away by angry waters. Police and rescue agencies found the quickest way in by air, and at any one time you could spot 5 helicopters shuttling people and supplies from the devastated area. And what about the people? Well, some came to see a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle. Others, weary from a night-long vigil, work silently to dig their way out of the mess. And for the families of those who lost their lives in the flood, it will be a storm and a day never to forget. If you've never seen a flood firsthand, if you've never waded knee or waist deep in mud and water, if you've never seen the agony and despair of the people with their cars piled on top of each other and their homes destroyed, well, there's no way you can imagine it. Back in 1936, the residents of the flood city thought that they had seen the last of the great floods, but they were proved wrong in 1977. Jon McClintock, Action News, Johnstown.
Remember it well.
Wow.
Now,
what a
what
long
day
time
was
ago.
that? The flood the thunderstorms began Tuesday night, but Wednesday was the
was the
20th.
day it all run.
So were you there on the 20th? Is that late in the day on the 20th?
No, actually, it was fairly early. One of the national morning news shows made a reference to what had happened, and my photographer said, "Come on, let's get going." We didn't call the person who was supposed to be in Johnstown that day, and we got over there fairly early during the day.
Yeah, I was out very early that morning, and I want to ask you. I mean, we can go through, and we will. Some of the statistical, the 85 people who died and the damages and stuff. I could, as a young person, I was 25. I had no idea. I'd never seen anything like that. And as you're talking about it, we were literally in the middle of it. One first memory that I don't think I'll ever forget. We were crossing Market Street at Maine. We were going from where City Hall is to what is now a part of Lee Hospital. Actually, it's now the Crichton Rehabilitation Center.
Lee
But
was
back
right
then, it
on
was
then.
the Big J Savings Bank Plaza, and we were crossing through waist-high water, walking on a diagonal, and there was a state policeman standing on the corner on the opposite side where we were headed, who saw me crossing, and he said, "Hey, Mark, be careful. There are open manhole covers." And I'm looking at black water to my waist. I stopped, and my photographer, Dave Delosier, and I, we slid our feet across because we knew if we hit the manhole, we were gone.
Yeah.
In fact, there were people that were later found in Seward that's exactly what happened to them. They hit the manhole. But it was just the sheer enormity of it, something I'd only seen in pictures. Was that a similar first impression for you?
Well, I don't think I can imagine that a place where I live, this had all happened right there.
Yeah.
No, it was far enough. I knew this was something I probably would never see again.
Right.
And it was probably one of my earlier sights of seeing Johnstown, period. So I did not have any before and after kind of thing. And getting in 56 to see Johnstown was half a day at the time. But no, this, I can't relate to you like you can. I would go home and everything would be fine. Our power would be restored. But over in Altoona area, where we had been seeing the storm all night long, it had knocked Channel 10 studios off the air, but not the transmitter. And so it was an inconvenience here. Over there, it was a matter of life and death.
Yeah, it was. We were without power, and in fact, WJAC, we had no power at our studio, and no power. We got power back to the studio, but the transmitter had been knocked out, so we were not on the air. The flooding started Tuesday night. We didn't get back on the air until sometime late day Thursday.
That was the best thing that ever happened to our ratings, apparently.
Yeah, but and it was trying to. You couldn't encapsulate everything that had happened because it was just massive. I remember interviewing the then county coroner Joseph Govecker outside of Conemaugh Hospital, and he was telling me about temporary morgues that had been set up, and he was already expecting, and at that time there may have been 3, maybe 10 people who they thought had perished. There was no concept of the fact that it would end up as 85 dead, but he did. He thought there was going to be a lot, and then the worst, as we learned through the day and trying to get to where we wanted to go, was virtually impossible. The little community of Tanneryville was, in essence, wiped out when the Laurel Run Dam, which sat above Tanneryville, was an old earthen dam, and it gave way.
Right.
And the stories from there were people that literally were swept away while they slept in it. When we were talking about the flooding in Texas a week and a half ago over the July 4th weekend. I'm thinking that's exactly what had happened. It was middle of the night. No one knew the dam was going to break, obviously. And the bizarre after effects. I remember one house sitting, what it looked like, in Tanneryville on an island. For some reason, when the dam broke, the waters that came rushing down and wiped out entire families had diverted so that this house sat untouched. Okay, and you could just see water and mud and debris all around it, but the house itself was fine, and the people inside of it were fine. I wonder, I found it difficult to come up with words.
Well, fortunately for me, there were enough things I had to throw in one story that day.
Right.
No, everyone overuses damage words for damages and everything, and I tried to be careful about that. And I did not know there was a Tanneryville or the Laurel Run Dam, and I flew over it the next day in a National Guard helicopter to go up to Homer City, and I looked down, there was the dam gone, but I didn't yet know the story of Tanneryville, which truly is the story of the Johnstown Flood of '77.
And when you think about it, it was caused by a thunderstorm that dumped a foot of rain on the dam in a matter of hours, less than 2, if I remember correctly. So the dam certainly wasn't built to withstand something like that. They call it a 500-year flood, and I always said to that, I said, were you around 500 years ago? How would you know that? But they try to measure it. But
you can't say that about Johnstown.
No. And all three floods, 1889, 1936, 1977, were different in how they originated and where the impact was, but they were all the same in that they claimed innocent lives, people who were just trying to go about their daily, here's what I'm doing now, or sleeping, laying in their bed in the middle of the night and never waking up.
Yeah. Johnstowners that I met the next day were opening their doors to find cars in their, down in Hornerstown especially, to find cars against their trees and their porch and everything. And people were fashioning little things like boats that they could get out of the deeper water. And we began to hear word that as many as 3 people had died. And of course, I didn't know about Tanneryville, West End, anything.
No.
And that really by itself is enough to put the Johnstown Flood on the map, I think, because those people, they were the ones who got it in one gush. And then it was gone. And that was a real tragedy of this. And you're right, I watched about Kerrville, and I think to myself, hey, look at Johnstown. I mean, you want to see where this happens and how it happens. And God bless them. I know what they're going through. And you had to actually live in your home area was a muddy swamp is what it was.
Yeah.
And lots of mud. And then you started getting the national reporters and all the agencies.
There were people from all around the world that came to cover that flood or tried to cover that flood because getting in and out of the city over the first few days was virtually impossible. The impressions are things that I don't think will ever leave either one of us because you just don't forget things like that.
Speaking of that, I was thinking prior to... Thank you all for extending the invitation to me to reminisce about that. I don't know that we've ever worked on a story together.
I don't think we did.
The many years we've known each other. And now, I recall when I came and would look at the Trib Democrat and area newspapers when I first came to the Johnstown, Altoona area, so many stories would include flood survivor. As the comment. That's all you needed to know about a person. They survived 89, not 36, 89. And that went through my head as I was thinking about we're the 2 old guys reminiscing about that flood. And I don't know if that'll make my obit, but it sure could make yours.
Well, I tell people all the time, I've been very fortunate in my career to be a part of 3 major news stories. One, the 77 flood was my first foray into reporting for JAC. I wasn't even working for the news department at that time.
Really?
No, I was a staff announcer, and I went to my boss and I said, people that had left for the weekend couldn't get back in. I said, there's a story out there that needs to be told. And I went out and I did that. And so that's one. One is obviously the crash of Flight 93, and also the rescue of the Q Creek 9, the 9 miners in Somerset County trapped for 3 days, a couple thousand feet. Any one of those would be a career definer. The fact that I'm blessed to be on 3, I always think, I have been blessed. But what got me was, and what my attitude towards reporting, and I believe yours was very similar. Yeah, we have to do facts. We have to tell you X, Y, and Z happened, but we try to find, and I've always tried to find, a way to tell the story from the people who experienced it. And I have 2 memories. One is an older gentleman, standing up outside his house, which looked like a pile of popsicle sticks. This was in Dale, and Dale and Hornerstown had been devastated when Solomon Run went crazy.
Right.
And and he's standing, and he's got a smile on his face. So I walk up to him, and I'm thinking, boy, I'm amazed. I said, that's what's left of your house. I said, is everybody okay? He goes, yeah. He said, the wife and I are fine. New washer and dryer we had delivered yesterday morning. It's gone, but, that's no big deal. And he still has this smile on his face. And I said, well, what are you going to do? And he goes, we're going to clean up and go. This is home. This is where we've lived all our life. We're not going anywhere. We'll get a new washer and dryer. We'll rebuild the house. Big smile on his face. And I remember thinking, how is that possible? But what happened to me, because I reported extensively for about 7 days in a row, I ran into more people like that who were so resilient. That's an overused word a lot of times when people go through tough times. But they literally were like, no, we've done this before. Mennonites and Amish came in and started without any direction from anybody and not being paid anything, was just hauling out literally tons of mud from basements and homes. And all of these people were together. And then the one that tops it off is a lady by the name of Beverly Smith, who lived Dale, Hornerstown, like somewhere, and her and her family had run to the top floor of their house. Her husband and 2 young boys died in the flood. One of the boys was swept away pretty early, and she told me this story as I interviewed her. She's holding on to the other boy, holding on to him by his T-shirt, and he's crying, and he said, Mommy, I'm scared. Don't let go. Don't let go. Don't let go. And she held on as long as she could until the floodwaters just swept him away out of her arms, and he died. And I remember thinking, and I said to her, how do you go forward, when something like that happens? And she said, you just find a way, because I have to. But I think of that. Yeah. So, and I use that sometimes when people want to tell me how tough things are. I'm going, no, you don't know what tough is. And I'm sure there's probably stories similar to that in Texas, that people who, and we're starting to read some of them, because that's the other thing. When you go to tell the fabric of a story, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens through time, and you go back and you look. But
Well, that's an aspect of the Johnstown story that I didn't have. I had no perspective, and
well, how would you?
Yeah, and I don't know if that many people knew who I was or Channel 10 was at that time.
I don't know that it really mattered. I mean, first of all, most people couldn't watch television because they didn't have power for days. Right?
Including you.
Yeah. So we're out there telling a story that it's like, but who's watching it?
Yeah.
And I remember that the then news director and main anchor at Channel 6, Ron Stevenson, who is very well known in Cambria County, when we finally got power back, he decided we were going to do a live program, because we had hauled this film. We had thousands and thousands and thousands of feet of film that we had processed, but we weren't on the air. So we're going to do this.
I want to pause you there. People don't realize we were using film. Back then.
Yes. Film.
And so there's at least a half hour from shoot it to dry it.
I mean, you got to process it and all that. So he decides we're going to do this, and he says, and you're going to be on it. And I'm like, what? I was just the guy that happened to be available, so I was going to go out and tell stories, but I was on this program, and I just watched it not too long ago. And it was again, memories, they're fading. They're not as strong as they were. Yeah. Certain things, Beverly Smith, I'll never forget the moment she said that she couldn't hold on to him any longer.
That's an amazing story.
You know, crying, "Mommy, don't let me go, don't let me go. I don't want to die, I don't want to die." And then he swept away. And I think that in our business, lately, it's all about getting as many people to watch or getting as many clicks as we can on the internet. And, there was no internet back then. There was no other way of communicating. The Tribune Democrat, I don't think, published for a couple of days because they were without power. But I'll never forget the stories of the people. I never will forget interviewing at that time, I think he was the general manager of Penn Traffic Store downtown. He might have even been an officer of the company. He had a gun on his hip. Ooh. And I remember doing the interview, and I said, "What's the gun for?" He said, "Well, we're going to shoot looters." And then I also remember...
And how do you deal with that, Mr. Young Reporter?
And again, it was trying to, take it all in. I remember talking to Bill Glosser outside Glosser Brothers department store about the loss to their business, and he says to me, he goes, "Hey, let's go inside. All the ice cream's going to melt on the second floor where they had this cafeteria." So we went up and had chocolate sundaes as we watched people outside still trying to figure it out. And when you look at the community today, it's always amazing to me. I mean, you go back to look at the destruction of 1889 and the way they came back at a time when they didn't have the kind of material help that we have now.
Right.
But the people there, the one thing that struck me, and I will never, ever forget, that was home. They stayed. There are people there today who have relatives who perished in 89 or 36. They went through 77, and they never left.
I think there's a greater sense of community amongst Johnstowners than in the Altoona area. We at one point had the railroad as the big employer, but up until the flood, the steel mills were the big thing still going on then. And I could think that everyone I've met is proud to have been or is proud to have come from Johnstown. I didn't have that sense anymore. And when I was asking people, I found myself slipping into the position of someone who, "Tell me about your town," because I don't know what the heck I'm talking about.
Sure.
And like I've used Hornerstown to indicate where I was. I have it in my head that that's where I was, but I don't know where Daleboro is.
Right. Well, it was right next door.
Okay.
So you could have been in both and not realized it. Because it, and again, that was there were all these small channels and streams that just exploded because of the amount of water.
Everything backed up.
It's interesting that Herb Fuel, who was a good friend of mine, the mayor, said he thought it was going to be $100 million. It ended up as a total of $300 million, and I did this last night. In today's dollars, that computes to $1.6 billion.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so you think of $300 million doesn't sound like a lot till you convert it to today's dollars, and it's $1.6 billion. But just think of that: 85 people lost their lives, over $1 billion again, or even at $300 million, which is an astronomical figure. How do you even compute that?
But we keep throwing those numbers out as though they're
Well, you're trying to give
measurable.
some perspective because, it's a flood. I remember I said all I had ever seen were what we called, when I was growing up, they were gully washers. And if there was a low part in the bottom of your street, it formed a pond.
Right.
And we went running through it and driving our bikes through it because that's what kids did.
Right.
You didn't think anything of it. And this was so much more than that. So much more than that.
I remember going into establishments, and especially in the men's room, there would be signs saying, "Don't spit, remember the Johnstown Flood." You ever see any of that?
No, you're unique. See, I knew you would bring something that I wouldn't be able to match.
Yeah.
You win. And that's
how I first heard about Johnstown. It was on these signs. It was apparently was of the day.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And so don't spit it. Remember the Johnstown Flood. It's going to come back at you.
And yet today, it's still viable. There's the Johnstown Flood tax, which the State House is now moving to get rid of. But
That's
that
on
was
booze.
I think it was something like that. But so it lived for all these years, and people were paying a tax that they didn't really understand. The money never. What a surprise! The money never really went where it was supposed to go. Hey, John, I really am thankful that you made yourself available to sit back here. And I think there's a lot of things that you and I could talk about
Oh heavens!
And maybe that's what we'll do. We'll start looking again. If I can get your drive team sitting over there watching all this that brought you over here. And I really do think he should pay you. I said that once before. I'll say that again.
You've got new fans.
Yeah. So, but Jon McClintock, pleasure, bud.
Thank you, Marty.
We've known each other a long, long time.
Well, of course, most of that time's been rivalry. We were both doing the weekend news. For
Yeah, but we weren't really rivals. We were friends. We were better than you were, but that's another story for another day.
And this could start a fight today.
Yes, it could. So we're going to end right there. Thanks so much for being with us. And please, if you've got ideas, stories you'd like to see us tackled, it's on my email address. Give me a shout, and we'll work on it. John, thanks. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.